limiting data that hackers want. So in order to provide you with the best information, if I could understand what industries you all work in, that would be helpful. So anyone want to share an industry that they work in? Industrial, education, retail?
Utility.
Can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Utility.
Utility, okay. Anybody else?
Consumer electronics.
Consumer electronics? Anyone else?
Finance.
Finance? Is that like banking finance?
Billing, yeah.
Okay.
Federal.
Federal like military, federal like FDA, federal?
Agency.
Okay. Like public agency or or Big Brother, non-public?
Or you need to leave.
Not that insidious.
Okay, fair enough. What do you guys feel like the biggest issue is when it comes to removing the data that hackers want? Social security numbers, date of births, that kind of stuff.
Finding it.
Finding it? Finding it in terms of on the network, or how do you mean?
So if you got a really large organization and you need to like go through and find things to sanitize, you might not always know where everything is. So actually finding it before somebody stumbles upon it can be a challenge.
Good point. Okay, finding it. What else? What are the other issues with getting the data that hackers want out of the infrastructure completely?
Well, identifying what that data is first, because if you just say, well, I have this data is important to me, that I want to keep this under wraps.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't defined it, it's pretty hard to say, point to it and say, well, this is important, we need to move this or secure this one more.
Okay, fair enough. What else? What are the other issues with getting social security numbers, date of births, credit card numbers out of the infrastructure?
Getting buy-in from management to be able to delete that stored data.
Getting buy-in from management. That's everybody in here problem, right? Budget, right?
Yeah.
How many people here do a monthly security report for your executives? Nobody? Have you ever seen one? No? Okay. It's not what the talk is about, but I'm going to explain it to you while I get the PowerPoint connected. So the monthly security report is a report that you create to give executives insight into what's happening in your environment. Because that report is going to be your foundation for every argument you make regarding budget. So what do you think that report would entail? Take a guess. How about spam? How many phishing emails were blocked that month? I gave the first example. What do you think? Come on, you guys don't participate. I'm going to sing in my son's advance. Okay, so I think you'll be better off.
How big is the organization? How many spam messages you're blocking a month?
That was I'm giving the first suggestion. I think on the report we should put how many phishing emails were blocked that month.
Some type of vulnerability assessment.
Vulnerability assessment. If we have an IPS at the perimeter, what can we use? Can we use that to say we had this many port scans or this many intrusion attempts, right? Right? Okay, so what else do we want to put on there?
If they were successful.
If they were successful, we have a problem.
Definitely a monthly report. That's yeah.
Everybody might be in trouble at that point. So, okay, we can say if they were successful. With spam, Barracuda has a very interesting feature where they actually tell you spam messages that it did not block. Now, if you can tell me a spam message that you didn't block, why didn't you block it? Hey, I didn't come up with it, but this is what they do. So that would be an instance where you could say, okay, we got 10,000 spam attempts this month. We had 50 go through. Now, if I'm an executive, I want to know why the 50 went through. You got to be prepared to answer that type of question. So, keeping the security report going. What else do you think we should have on there? Spam, vulnerability assessment kind of thing. What else? What else would scare the hell out of an executive.
Viruses found.
Virus is found. Perfect example, straight to the point. What else?
Data lost.
Data lost?
I'm sorry, again, maybe it's going to go in the data. But if you're summing, doing a summary, if somebody lost a laptop, stuff like that.
Okay, so let's say, for example, a healthcare company then, right? Because we've seen that, right? Lost, stolen laptops that had medical records on them. That would be a good thing to put on a report. How about how much that cost the company, right? We want to put that on the report too? Because it's, okay, a lost laptop, we had to inform 100,000 people of this issue. There's going to be costs associated with that. And if that happens more than once in a year, that's a real problem. What else do you think we should put on the report?
Some of your help desk tickets.
Related to security?
Yeah, even not necessarily all the password reset, but if you can see, hey, by the way, some of these low-level tasks that you're saying aren't that big of a deal. This is how now it relates into security, or if this is going to lead to a potential problem that, hey, well, if this person keeps getting malware, something else on their machine, that could go into your budget or your argument for your security training.
Yeah, that rolls into what the gentleman in the back was saying, but yes, virus attempts and things like that. So generally, the security report is it's not in the presentation, but it's a foundation for every argument you make regarding security. No matter whether it's buying security appliances, buying cloud-based monitoring, whatever it is, you're going to an executive and you're saying, I need $50,000 for this, I need $100,000 for that, and all you're providing is your word. Maybe you go to SANS and get some information. Maybe they've had some security awareness training. You're building on that. Nothing helps like the security report. So if you don't do one, I would strongly recommend that you start doing one. My contact information is at the end. Feel free to reach out. We can work on it together. I have a template I can send you, but it's a really great idea to help increase not only just awareness of the attacks that happen, but to increase budget as well, which helps all of what we're trying to do. All right, so jumping into the PowerPoint while we're here today. Data that you don't store cannot be hacked. First, we want to explain what it is that we're talking about. What data are we talking about? We're talking about data that hackers want. The way I classify, this is my classification, it doesn't necessarily align with the way the industry does it. So I want to set that up front. Sorry. PII, everybody knows what that is? Personal identifiable information. Sensitive information. It's a general term, different in every environment you go in. And I want to explain how I define the two. I define PII by the law. And the reason I define it by the law is because if there is a PII breach, then it requires a data breach disclosure by law. So I keep those terms together because we know exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about credit monitoring. We're talking about the whole shebang of data breach aftermath. Okay? So, can anybody guess why driver's license number is in red?
That varies from state to state as to what the breach laws are, the threshold, as well as your announcement of the breach.
It's a good answer. It does vary from state to state, but that's not why. Anybody else guess why driver's license number is in red? Come on, I'm getting a song ready. I'm going to start singing it. No? Okay. Because it is the one that most people don't know is on the list as far as the law is concerned. So as security professionals, we might know. But if you ask a financial aid person or someone who deals with PII on a regular basis, if a driver's license number equals a social security number in terms of data breach, they don't know. So that's why it's in red. And when you walk away today and you're going back to your security duties, keep in mind, people do not know driver's license numbers are on that list. You have a breach of just names and driver's license numbers. That is a data breach. It requires disclosure, and you might have to do some identity protection from that. At any point you have a question, please stop us, and we can talk about it. Everything else here is standard. SSN, credit, debit card number, bank account number. So now, sensitive information. This is where we have a lot of fun. I'll tell you too. I'll tell you too. So, as I said, I structure my sensitive information based on the way I like it to be. PII goes with the law, period. That's the way I do it. Now, sensitive information is very different and it's a little more complicated. First one is self-explanatory, intellectual property. We know that. Infrastructure. Anybody tell me why infrastructure is on this list?
Why do you want to give out your list of your assets, your IP addresses, or something that, hey, if I have a map of this is important, this is how I can connect to it.
Architecture, any kind of notes regarding the infrastructure, how many servers you have, what's in the DMZ, you know, which application server does what, which resources have PII, all that's a part of infrastructure information, but it's not PII. However, we need to protect it like PII, so we put it on the SI list, the sensitive information list. HIPAA is not on the PII list. However, because of the HIPAA law, we have to protect it. It's on the SI list. Why do we have vendors up here?
Because that could be a vector of attack. Then
Explain. How could it be?
if someone is able to compromise a vendor, they potentially have access to your sensitive information through the vendor.
Isn't that Home Depot got whacked, right? For a vendor?
That's the word on the street, but you know, the jury's still out on that. So let's use an example. We're sitting.
Target.
Jury's still out. I'm telling you. We're sitting in Wilmington University, right? Okay, so let's say Wilmington University uses company A for their data center air conditioning, right? Well, if I know that, now I know who's going in the data center, right? Can't fix it if you don't go in. So if I wanted to do something hostile, well then I might go get a job at that company. Or I might just pop the dude upside his head and take his uniform and go to work for him the next day. Whatever the case is. However, now I know a third-party way to get access to that organization. Third parties are just as liable to be used as a tool for hackers, just as going directly to the organization. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. Contacts. Contacts is pretty much the same as vendors. The people you know, if you are one of the great people who are on LinkedIn, hey, I'm a system administrator for Geico. And then you're on Facebook and you have your family, your friends, you know, you guys are going to the local pub that evening. All those are contacts. I don't have to come straight to you. I can go to the contacts around you and use them as a tool to get what I need. Usernames, passwords, self-explanatory. Anybody don't understand why they're up there? All right, great. Date of births. Question of the day. Why are date of births here but not on the PII list? Because the law does not have them on the PII list. Now, for this, we're talking about Delaware, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. There may be a few states that do have, but the surrounding states do not have date of birth on the PII list. That's why date of birth is up here. If date of births are breached with names, does it constitute a data breach disclosure? Everybody's looking at me like, what? If names and date of births are breached, does it constitute a data breach disclosure?
No.
It's a trick question.
Yes,
No.
Why yes?
because you can go after the birth certificate of the date of birth.
So before you can say yes or no, what do you have to ask yourself?
What is it that makes you
What state are you in? Okay? So when we talk about preventing data breaches, preventing data breach disclosures, and all the costs that come with it, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what state are you in? What laws are you governed by? Because the law governs data breach disclosures. Everybody understand that? Okay. So we already talked about some of the industries that you're in. My friend in the back said utility. Okay? I imagine utility might have some Unix servers. Yes? Maybe. Some old ones, probably. Maybe even a mainframe or 10. And so we're going to have applications there. We're going to have databases. We're going to have everything that's listed up here. So how can we today plan over the next 5 to 10 years on completely removing PII from the environment using a utility company? Let's say a water company. You give them your name, date of birth, social security number, they do a credit check. Are they storing that information? Yes. Do they have to store it? I'd argue no. Who's going to tell them that though? I think the security professional with their handy-dandy security report should walk in and say, you know what? I think we need to plan to get rid of this. Now, picture this. As a security pro, you walk in, you ask for funding to protect the perimeter, to protect the data. But what happens when you team up with the infrastructure guys and you walk in and you say, hey, let's go in together. But when you plan, I want you to plan this way. Now you're going in and you're going in with the infrastructure budget, which is always bigger, right? Always bigger. And it's just a change to what they're doing. It's not additional funding for security. You see what I'm saying? So now we're not talking about security budget. We're talking about infrastructure budget to do things a different way. Another trick question. If there are no social security numbers, what is your risk of being breached for identity theft? Or what is your risk for having a data breach that results in identity theft if there are no social security numbers in your environment? So you go in, you talk to an executive, and you say, hey, we have 3 million social security numbers here. That equals, let's say, $25 per social security number, $75 million that we could chuck out if they're breached. And in 5 years, we can have infrastructure with 0 social security numbers, and that equals $0 million. Are we not speaking executive language now? Right? Did you not just make a new best friend? You know, and you're taking the infrastructure guys with you because you're not talking security, you're talking infrastructure. But it has the effect of reducing the risk to 0. Now that's an example that would take a lot of work. But some companies, some organizations, some industries, they have the ability to make these changes, to remove this data from the environment completely. They just need someone to start the conversation. So while you're doing perimeter defense, database security, server security, you also got to say, you know what? Yes, we want to secure the infrastructure, but why don't we get rid of this data that's going to cost us a lot of money? That's what I want you to think about.
Oh, you did it. Go ahead.
Backspace. 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 Backspace.
Now I know that.
This is Michael Jr., in case you didn't know. He's my 8-year-old twin. So, payment processing. Apple Pay leads the way. Does anybody know why Apple Pay leads the way? Not a clue? Anybody know why we say Apple Pay leads the way and not Google Pay? Not Chase Pay? Not any of the other electronic payment systems?
Maybe they connect to your Apple ID instead of your name.
They give me a commission check to say it.
So they use like a generate a random number every single transaction, so it can't be harvested.
Yes.
Encrypted.
Virtual numbers for transactions instead of the actual card numbers. That's a part of it. So I'm gonna break it down for you. iPhone 6 Plus. When I added the card to here, my card went to one place, a chip hardwired to this phone. It does not go to Apple servers. That is the first important point. It does not go to Apple servers, ever. Secondly, the chip, like everything else in Apple's iPhone, is segregated. It cannot be hacked across the network. So, in order to do a mass hack, you'd have to have 50,000 phones. Now, Apple is upfront about this information. Google is not. And if you know Google, like I know Google, there's a server somewhere sitting with them card numbers. And you'll figure it out when they say, oh, Google Pay was breached, 100,000 card numbers compromised. And then you'll know they're storing the card numbers. Okay? I'm serious, that's what's going to happen. So,
Go back.
if you are processing cards in your environment, okay, please do not store the card numbers. If you need a record of transaction, store the last four. If they can't get the record by the last four, then the record doesn't get got. But we're talking about $15 per card number. If you have 100,000 transactions, 100,000 different cards, that's $1.5 million. For what? What benefit did that provide? You know? So we really have to start looking at removing this information from the environment. And if we're not storing it, it's not going to be in transit, right? Somebody brought up Target earlier. Help me understand how PIN numbers got breached. I'm sorry, I'm lost. How do you breach PIN numbers? They're only in transit. So what you're telling me is that not only did you compromise a server, but you were actively recording network traffic. It doesn't get more ridiculous than that. Bottom line, it just doesn't. Okay, so if you don't store it, it can't be in transit, so there's no server to hack. There's no credit card data to sniff on the line. Again, data breach avoided. Let's look at an example. I'll use one of you as an example. There's a bookstore here. Well, let's say, for the sake of this conversation, the bookstore only accepts Apple Pay. What is the risk of data breach for the bookstore? Zero. $0 million. And I like to add the million because if there was a risk, it'd be $1 million attached to it. So $0 million is the risk if they only use Apple Pay, because the systems in the bookstore never receive the credit card numbers. That's the frame of mind that we have to get executives thinking. How do we get rid of this data? Lastly, EMV. Does anybody know why EMV is a joke? It is the punchline in everywhere I talk. So, we put a chip in a card, and we say, if you go to a terminal, it's going to check to make sure that that chip is in the card. Well, did anybody shop online this month? I did. I shopped online yesterday. What's the question you want to ask? Did they check my chip, right? No. How? So what does EMV have to do with online shopping? Nothing. So how did we fix the problem? Oh, we did it. Sorry. We just mandated something that didn't fix anything. Thanks. Good old government. So EMV, yes, it works. It keeps people from taking TD Bank's nice debit card printer and printing cards at home and going to the store and swiping away. It did not, however, touch online banking fraud. How we have a government mandate that forces people to comply, that doesn't fix a single damn problem, I don't know. It's frustrating. I mean, it really pisses me off. Next slide. Okay, so I can't talk about that anymore. I'll start getting emotional. know the law. Do your research. 2 things I want you to do when you walk into that executive's office. I want you to have a data breach report that they have been getting monthly. I want you to have the law, because that is where the money comes from. It comes from the law. What data requires data breach disclosure? If you align your PII the way I do, then if any PII is stolen, you know that that's a data breach disclosure. Does stolen encrypted data count as a data breach? Can anybody answer that question?
Maybe not if you have a good key, please.
What was that?
Maybe not if you have a good key on it.
Notice you said a good key, not just encrypted.
Sure.
So
Why not?
that goes back to the law. Some states say if it's readable data. Some states say if the data is encrypted, it does not constitute as a data breach. It depends on the state law that your organization is governed by. But that has to go with you. I don't want to get into encryption in this talk, but encryption is your next best friend. So if you're in an environment where you have limited the amount of PII in the environment, but you cannot remove it 100%, the very next step is encryption, right? And so you want to take that in there with you. The law says if we encrypt the data, then it's not a data breach. Well, if all your PII is encrypted and the keys are not on the same server as the PII, I'm going to shed a tear in a minute. If your PII is encrypted, please don't store the keys on the same server, on the same subnet, on the same infrastructure. Put them somewhere else, please. There are some state laws that say if the keys were compromised, it is a data breach. So on a serious side, you want to make sure keys are somewhere safe away and not copied all over the infrastructure. So what is the risk, right? Going back to the risk question, what is the risk if well-used Social Security numbers are stolen, they are encrypted, the keys were not even stored in the infrastructure? What's the risk? Nothing, right? My favorite term, $0 million. That's the risk. So when you talk to the executives, you're speaking executive speak. Throw that $1 million on there. This will cost $50 million. Readable Social Security numbers. Well, encrypted Social Security numbers cost $0 million. Ever. As long as the keys remain away, there's no risk. So tell me what your executive's excuse can be. What do you think their excuse can be to that argument? Kind of hard, right? You got to think hard, you got to find one, because when you're talking those millions of dollars, what can they say? When does a data breach have to be reported? Very, very important. Varies by state. Also a part of your plan. If your PII is stolen, you have to know how long you have to report that. Why is that important? Well, if your PII is not encrypted because you didn't talk to your executive yet, because everybody's going to talk to their executive when they leave, right? Yes? Okay. So if that happens, you have to know how long you have. Well, if your detection time isn't fast enough, well then you have a whole nother issue. If it has to be reported within 30 days and you're only looking at certain things every 30 days, you have a problem in your process that's going to cost your organization a whole lot of money. So you want to look at that stuff so that your process aligns with the law. What happens if a vendor is breached for your customer data? Any cloud fans in the room? Salesforce taking over the world? What happens? Anybody want to answer that? No? You want me to sing a song? I got a song ready. My son's got a dance.
I think what's going to happen is that both of you are going to be sad.
Nope.
Agency?
There's gonna be a lot of
They- Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of money taken from somewhere. So the answer is that vendor is gonna say, hey, excuse me, sir, 100,000 of your customer records were breached. We're still investigating, but we just want to let you know because the law requires us to let you know in 2 weeks. Have a nice day. And we're gonna go. And you are going to piss in your pants, and then after that, figure out the aftermath of a $100,000 record breach. It falls on you. The customers gave you, i.e., your organization, the data. It doesn't matter. Now you can go after the vendor and say, "Hey, you didn't secure it right." Were you going to?
There's no way to like contractualize that to have so like you're gonna subcontract this part out and you have that contract there saying if it gets breached like it's on you then.
So it's interesting you brought that up. Has anybody seen the mandate from FCC? They're going to hold people accountable for the way FCC or TC? I think it was FCC. It was TC? TC. Thank you. I always get them mixed up. They're going to hold organizations accountable for not protecting data. So my first question is, no, they're not just going to hold them accountable. They have to go through this audit process or some kind of monitoring over a set of years and show the FTC that they are protecting data. So my question is OPM going to be on that list? Do other federal government agencies also get subjected to that? Because I'm confused. You know, I really am. So to directly answer your question, the FTC is creating oversight for large organizations. Contractually, you can put that in there, but understand the process. You against the vendor, the customer against you, right? The media doesn't care about the vendor unless it's Salesforce. Is anybody else waiting for Salesforce breach notification? I am. It's coming. Just a matter of time. So understand what the situation is going to look like before it happens. Take that with you into your executive meeting. We can sue them, but the responsibility falls on us as the organization who the customers gave the data to. Very, very important. So here, this is an excerpt straight out of the Delaware law. I just wanted to show you some examples. In red are what they define as PII. C is a little more complex. Account number, credit or debit card number, in combination with any required code, access code, or password that will permit access to a resident's financial account. That's a gray area. And there's a lot of legal room for battle in there. But for the most part, social, driver's license number, bank account numbers. Now, what I do want you to take away, personal information does not include publicly available information. So when we talk PII, we want to make sure we talk about very specific PII. We don't want to let anyone misconstrue the conversation. Okay? So anything that might be personal but isn't on the list, we want to make that argument very clear to executives. So because you know they're going to go somewhere, they're going to go to a conference. And somebody's going to say, yeah, well, if names and phone numbers are breached, that's a data breach, and you have to tell the state, and you have to do a data breach disclosure. And they're going to come back and be like, I just found this out. Oh my God, they're going to call you at 3 in the morning. We need a data breach disclosure. We're going to get fired. You know, Godzilla's coming. So you need to know the law. You need to be able to pull this up and say, hey, no, here's the law. Names and phone numbers are not on it. Go back to sleep. Okay? You need to know that stuff. There is always somebody who knows nothing about security putting information into an executive's ear. Why? Because executives control budget. It's an issue every security professional in the world has to face. Anybody ever experienced that? Someone goes to a conference, comes back and grabs them? Yeah? Anybody has not experienced it? Okay, great. We're all speaking the same language. Maryland law, social security number, driver's license number, credit card number, debit card number, same little clause, in combination with required security code. There's a new one. An individual taxpayer identification number. Just in case someone has, I've never actually seen that, but just in case someone has a number that associates with paying taxes that's not a social security number. That is included in Maryland law. We didn't see that in Delaware though, did we? Know the law, know the state's law that governs your organization. This is Maryland law continues, same publicly available information clause. Pennsylvania law, social, driver's license number, state identification number, financial number, same thing. The term does not include publicly available information. So, going back to executive support, that's what this is all about. You get with the infrastructure team. You guys devise a way over the next 5 to 10 years, the organization can get rid of all stored PII completely, right? Well, when you go to that executive, you have to make sure that you explain the $0 million. That is your opening point, your closing point, your punchline, your everything. There is $0 million of risk if we do this. Executives, go back. Executive support will lead to project funding. Why? Because we're trying to transition the infrastructure. That's going to take funding. But it's easier to get infrastructure funding than it is to get security funding. We all agree on that? Infrastructure serves the environment. Security is the red line on the budget that everyone hates, but they don't want to end up on the news, so they pay for it.
You're the guy that keeps getting in infrastructure's way.
Yeah, exactly. Infrastructure wanted to bring in all new stuff, and no, security had to get that IPS, you know?
Right.
So this is another way for us to make some friends. We don't get a lot of opportunities to make friends, so we have to take advantage of it. Project funding. Sometimes it might be something very small that you have to do. Other times it might be completely steering the organization's infrastructure in a different direction. Talking about 10 to 20, $100 million. Don't let that discourage you. Once you have the right people on your side, you can make a change in your organization that other organizations have not made yet. And having that executive support will bring the funding necessary. Having that infrastructure support will bring the funding and the expertise to say, hey, security guy's saying it, but hey, what he's proposing fits what I'm doing too. So we want to make friends, we want to get that support so that we can steer our organization in a different direction. You know, breaches will always occur. You know, is anyone familiar with the 0-day market? Anyone not familiar with the 0-day market? Everyone understand what it is? So, yeah, it is. That's right. There are more and more companies coming up that you will not see on CNBC. They are not publicly traded companies. You'll not hear them talked about like CyberArk, who get paid lots of money to find 0 days. So much that now they package them in a nice package that is exploitable. From the perimeter, Cisco at the perimeter, to an IPS or a load balancer, all the way to the data center. They'll create a nice little package with a bow and sell it for $20 million. Now, used to be, the NSA was the only buyer of this information. Who do you think is buying it now?
Everybody.
China.
What do you think Europe did as soon as Edward Snowden started leaking stuff? You think they just sat there and said, hey, we're going to put up more defense because they're trying to take our stuff? Oh no. They went and bought them some 0 days and they went to war. You know, you let me tell the cyber war started whenever Snowden started sharing everything he shared. Now, I don't agree or disagree with him. I stay out of that. But once these countries found out that the level the United States has taken it to, you best believe that they stepped it up. And this is how they do it. There is no other way to hack on a massive scale than the 0-day market. So we talked about improving the infrastructure is more important than security and all right. And we have about 10 minutes left. So what I'd like to do is look at some real life examples. I've shared a lot of information with you about transitioning to a certain place, but there's always different industries and different infrastructure in the room. So anybody willing to share some information or tell me why this would be a problem for them, we can engage about it, we can talk about it and work through it. Any volunteers? Federal government?
Well, I can give you a place I used to work. Since I don't like them.
Sure. Examples are the best way we can do it.
Fortress Investment Group.
Okay.
If I'm giving names, I'm not a fan of them. Asset management company, so they're doing a lot of stock trades. I'm sure some of the secret sauce has, because they're not actually doing retail, it's institutional. They're not going to have PII individual social security numbers. However, they're doing retirement plans, something like that, so there is a tax ID associated with it, which if you're doing that type of level, you're not talking about, mom, pause, $30,000, $2 million is $200 million at a time that if I got into this and drained this, lots of money and other things. So in their case, there's going to have to be some record that says brand X company, tax ID number. They gave us $2 million for us to trade. It needs to be allocated in 40% bonds, 20% overseas, 5% growth, the rest, whatever. But they'll have to have some pretty detailed information.
So it's not often talked about in the media, but business identity theft is far worse than consumer identity theft. Far worse. It doesn't get any media attention, okay? But just with the tax ID alone, nothing else. Not only can you steal an organization's identity, you can open an office, a bank account, credit card processing. You can even start getting some of their customers if they're in a different part of the world, just from the tax ID number. Business verification is a tragedy, right? So that in itself is a good reason to move away from having EIN numbers in the environment, right? They don't need the EIN numbers to track the transactions. They need them when the customer first comes in to authenticate that customer, right? Business credit check. And then because of that, they then use the EIN number through the lifetime of the customer. But is it necessary? No, it's not. So in that scenario, I'm looking at a way to simple customer ID that when a company comes in and they bring a $200 million retirement plan, you have to accept the EIN first. You have to do that credit check. But after that, they get a customer ID. The customer ID follows their money for the lifetime of the customer. The EIN, after that credit check, gets removed in my world. That's what I'm aiming for. That's when you start the conversation with the infrastructure people, and then you kind of work through it. It's not going to be perfection, and they might say, no, it can't go away. Okay, but can we limit it down to 1 server or 2 servers? Can we determine where it's going to be in transit? All that. That's when all the nitty-gritty part of the details comes out. But you got to start the conversation with the infrastructure folks first. That's why I use Apple Pay as an example, because the credit card number never leaves. It's a virtual number, And so if that virtual number is compromised, it's not a data breach disclosure. And it really doesn't mean anything because they can't do anything with it. Does that make sense? Any other examples? So I got 10 minutes left. I have time for a song.
I have a question.
I will call somebody else.
I would like to dance.
So there's a few companies out there that kind of collect information about you, your mother's maiden name, all the different things. Could they act as a surrogate for the verification or authentication of that customer? Has anyone looked into that model where you have a trusted party that even if it turned out to be the government?
You mean kind of like reproducing the credit check process, but without the PII? It would be something else.
They would keep it, and nobody else needs to have it. They would have a key or something that allowed they're trusted to go to that vault.
So the problem with that is that we have publicly traded companies that manage identities. I mean, I don't understand how that's allowed.
Yeah, there was recently a really big data breach.
In that area too?
Yes.
One of Experian's partners supposedly caused a data breach that. So when a data breach occurs and the company comes out and blames someone else, do you think anyone verifies that? Do you think anyone could verify that the HVAC vendor caused Target's data breach?
Well, when the final report comes out,
The report is typed in on paper. Does anybody actually go and
Like
say,
verified
hey,
and
show
like,
me the
you see these
logs,
logs?
show me the IP addressing, show me where your network touched my network, the nitty-gritty details of it? I don't think so. When these companies get in front of the camera, like any other time in the world, it's about what's best for the company, not necessarily the truth. So you got to be careful with that. That's all I'm gonna say. We can talk one-on-one about that kind of stuff.
Maybe the company pays off a vendor to take the hit.
Or they just say, you're going to take it. We paid you enough money over the last 20 years, you're going to take this hit. The HVAC company didn't make a public response that I know of. So I think that's a good model to look at. Even taking socials out of the process of validating a consumer, or EINs out of the process of validating a business. Now, for businesses, you have what's the name of the company? Dun & Bradstreet, right? Yeah, you have Dun & Bradstreet, which you have to give them your EIN to sign up. But when someone searches you, they're not searching you from your EIN. They're searching from your business name, contact information. That's a good start, but they don't necessarily compete with the credit bureaus. So it's a gray area. It's a good thought. It's something to think about. People like us can drive that kind of change if we get that executive support and say, hey, we need to start doing things differently in order to protect the company. And the first organizations that do it are the ones that they're the pioneers. They're the ones that are going to set the stage going forward. My son is back here playing on the computer.
So I have a slightly different view. I come from like frontline customer service.
Okay.
So just the way I understand it from where my job is, simplicity for the customer is like number one for most execs.
Right.
So like when you say remove identification from the, to verify a customer, what would you do to replace like social security numbers? Because again, giving them a customer number, customers don't remember things, and I will attest the thousands of phone calls I've taken. They do not remember things they create themselves. They'll remember the social, nothing else. So I mean, that's an argument you would have to overcome. It's like, cool, but now the customers won't like us because we make them remember something else. I spend days having people reset their passwords that they set 5 minutes ago, and it's really funny.
So I say, let them be mad. And the response is, well, man, we don't want your social security number to be stolen by Romanian hackers and them buying yachts on your credit. So we got rid of that. That's why you need executive support. It has to be driven from the top. And it needs to be a campaign. Not, hey, here's our policy, but hey, we are Blackwater, and our organization is serious about protecting your identity. So you're going to need to remember this information because you can't bring us your social. We don't have access to it. Then when you do it from that level, from the top down, it will be change. But you'll never end up in the paper for a data breach. $0 million. Now, let's say there's other stuff that you can use that people aren't going to forget, right? And the social has been, the last quarter social has been used so much. I mean, goodness, it's everywhere. Let's say secret questions, right? Give them the option to create their own. And say, okay, well, it has to be, within these constraints, but they create their own. Your first school. You're not going to forget your first school unless you have amnesia. Most people remember the first school as your first crush, or I don't know.
Maybe a different security. I mean, I've heard so many different arguments about that because I've heard that being an issue too. Some customers hate doing that. It's like, people can find that information about me. And I'm like, how? Why are you worried about
People
that?
can find the last 4 of your social.
Where'd you go to school? Starbucks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Don't
usually I get a big fight over that, right? But yeah, lying needs to be a part of the process. Not lying like just to tell a lie, but hey, this secret question isn't here for you to actually answer the question correctly per se. It's here for you to create a username and a password. But it's a secret question format, right? So if the question is, who's your first girlfriend? And your answer is Camaro or Corvette, or no, those might be people's names. I don't know, Avalanche or something. Something that's not a name, but it's your username and password. Except they're giving you the username, you're giving them the password back. People are the issue, and so in an environment like what you're talking about, we would lose the battle of completely removing it because it would be too much change too fast. But what can we do? We can get a direct portal to Experion. Now, if we get a direct portal to Experion, and we're using the information on Experion servers, are we storing it? What's our risk to data breach? $0 million. That's why the conversation is so important. Security pros, we go in and we started. The infrastructure people are going to push back. That's what they're supposed to do. Smile, say we can work together and find another solution. But there's so many ways to do it now. Pass the buck. Experion already has the liability. You're not giving them anything they don't already have. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so those environments are tough and they're going to be hard to change. Women's University is the same kind of ordeal. You got students coming in, right? They're dealing with their life. And this university, there are more working students than there are 18-year-olds coming out of high school. So these people have a lot going on. They can't deal with a whole lot of change. This would be a perfect example of a place that could implement some kind of direct access to a credit bureau to do authentication. And then when they come back to this system, there's no PII. It's just, okay, we validated who you are using Experion. Now we're going to process the request, reset the password, whatever the case is.
Well, I was just going to say, for what it's worth, the company that I work for actually does that. That's the billing thing that we do, is we store PII for other companies so that they don't store PII.
Nice.
We give them an ID number and they can retrieve it from the ID. They can use it from the ID number, things like the card numbers and things like that. We can use that processor.
That's awesome.
So it's all on our side.
As long as you don't have a data breach.
Yes.
As long as you have one.
Keys are stored on different systems. I personally have worked on that.
You know, I'm telling you,
all my ass.
I'm waiting for the Salesforce breach to hit the news. It's coming. I promise you cannot be cloud that long and not have a breach unless you're Apple. I'm sorry, and they're not Apple. So, you know. That's all our time, guys. Thank you very much. I hope it was helpful to you. Let me know if you have any questions.